Aarushi Talwar was murdered on the night of 16th of May 2008. So was Hemraj, although his body was discovered only a day later. And from the time the incident was discovered by the parents, and from the time the Noida police stepped into investigating the case went through many twists and turns. You must understand that the first 48 hours are very crucial in any criminal investigation, and collection of the best evidence from the scene of crime takes place within the framework of the first 48 hours. However, as we noticed from the beginning and as was apparent later on, the Noida police completely botched up the investigation in those first 48 hours. Anyone and everyone was allowed to trample the scene of crime. The exhibits were handled by many people, including people from outside, people from the media, the general public, and therefore there was no sanctity to the crime scene. Given the fact that all of this happened, it then became impossible to collect any evidence which could point towards the guilt or the involvement of anybody. As it turned out, on 23rd of May, Dr. Rajesh Talwar was arrested, and the Meerut Zone IG Police gave his infamous press conference where he made all kinds of random allegations against Aarushi, Dr. Talwar, and the domestic help Hemraj. By the time the CBI took over the investigation of the case on 1st of June 2008, much of the evidence had already been lost. Dr. Talwar was in custody. The first team of the CBI looked at the case from different angles, and there was a period during June of 2008 when three domestic helps were also taken into custody, namely Krishna, Rajkumar, and Vijay Mandal. Eventually, the first team of the CBI, filed a report before the Special Court of Noida, claiming that there was no evidence against Rajesh Talwar and he could be released unconditionally. Thereafter, a second team of the CBI took over the investigation. The investigating officers of the first team were inexplicably removed, and this second team, which took over the investigation a year later, had its own set of ideas as far as the case was concerned. And what we then noticed was a marked shift in the evidence. So while postmortem doctors who conducted the postmortem of Aarushi on 16th of May and Hemraj on 17th of May had documented the injuries as well as other relevant factors in their report, and had not suggested that there was anything remotely abnormal in the child's sexual organs. Suddenly these doctors 2 years later changed their version and gave a different version to the second team, and from there this whole the whole theory of this being a honor killing after the father saw this 13-year-old child in a compromising situation with the 55-year-old domestic help. That's when this theory really took off. And based on this, the CBI then began to make major shifts in almost all their investigative findings thus far, including the weapon of offense. So it changed from a kukri to a golf stick and a surgical knife, etc., etc. And the doctor's evidence began to be tailored around these new weapons of offense, which they thrust on the case. On the 29th of December 2010, the CBI ostensibly filed a closure report. It was actually a charge sheet masquerading as a closure report because the entire document read like an accusatory document against Rajesh and Nupur Talwar. Predictably, the special court in Ghaziabad summoned Nupur and Rajesh Talwar to face trial, but not before Rajesh Talwar, who was the first informant in the case, had given a detailed protest petition protesting against the findings of the CBI and asking the court to order further investigation based on the research the couple themselves had undertaken in the interim, wherein foreign laboratories had agreed to conduct the LCN DNA or the touch DNA test on some of the exhibits. You will recall there was a bloody palm print which was recovered from which was taken from the terrace, and other such important pieces of evidence which could have been sent for purposes of advanced DNA examination, and a determination could have been made as to who actually committed the crime. This conversation had been going on with the second team of the CBI for a while, and it seemed as though they were inclined towards sending these exhibits to the foreign laboratories. But in the last minute, they decided not to do so. And even in the protest petition that Rajesh Talwar filed before the trial court, he had specifically asked that these exhibits be sent for forensic examination to laboratories abroad. That was denied. And with that, we lost probably the best evidence in the case. As you know, thereafter the couple stood trial and they were convicted. And it is now that the judgment of the appellate court has come out, where the judgment of the trial court of conviction and sentence has been set aside. So really this case has seen so many twists and turns. There have been multiple theories, no consistency in investigative findings. And most importantly, I think the case against Nupur and Rajesh, instead of being based on hard evidence, was based on theories, fanciful theories, innuendos, conjectures, surmises, none of which could ultimately stand judicial scrutiny. I am not for a minute suggesting that circumstantial evidence is not valid evidence in a murder case, not at all. Circumstantial evidence, if proved and if it is robust, can become the basis of conviction. However, the circumstantial evidence cannot be based on someone's imagination. And that's what happened in this case. The investigating officer had an imaginative theory in his head, and he put forward that theory. It was not backed by any corroborative evidence. And therefore, aside from his statement, he wasn't an eyewitness to what happened that night. There was really no evidence to suggest that the couple committed the crime. I would also like to underscore another important factor in this case, and that is the fact that in this case, if there was one credible piece of evidence, it was the recovery of a pillow cover, a purple color pillow cover, from the room occupied by the earlier suspect, Krishna. This pillow cover and a kukri was recovered from his possession. Both of them were found to be blood-stained, corroborated by the forensic lab report from Delhi. The kukri was not sent for DNA examination, but the pillow cover was sent for DNA examination, and the DNA laboratory in Hyderabad confirmed that the blood stains on Krishna's pillow cover matched the DNA of Hemraj. So in this fairy tale which was developed and forwarded by the CBI, if there was one credible piece of evidence, it was this. The CBI did not examine this evidence, either deliberately or through oversight. No mention of it was made in their report filed before the special judge. When we were summoned, or when the couple was summoned to face trial, at that stage, for the first time, these documents were made available to them. And when we examined these documents, we saw that there was clearly evidence staring in the face, which pointed to the involvement of somebody other than Nupur and Rajesh Talwar. When we brought this to the notice of the CBI, what do? They dismissed it outright, of course. But then the investigating officer writes a letter during trial to the laboratory in Hyderabad, suggesting to them that finding which they had given was the result of a typographical error. Of course, the laboratory meekly accepted that and said, yes, that finding pertaining to the purple color pillow cover linking Krishna with the crime is the result of a typographical error. in a 100-page document, everything else was fine except this one critical piece of evidence which pointed towards the involvement of somebody else. The case as built against the Talwars was really based on, I would say, no evidence. The medical evidence was so corrupted. I would say the two doctors perjured themselves because in the documents that they signed off after conducting postmortem, they make no mention of anything which was remotely suggestive of any sexual activity as far as the child and Hemraj were concerned. But 2 years later, they do a complete U-turn and they make the most horrific allegations against this 13-year-old child. Likewise, the evidence of the pillow cover is disregarded. So in the many twists and turns that this case has seen between the Noida police, the first team, the second team, in the end we got a mishmash. What is a matter of deep regret is of course one that a couple was prosecuted even though they did not commit this crime. But what was even worse was that in this process, the investigating agencies in the country allowed the real killers of the crime to escape. And that really is the tragedy, because 10 years after the incident, we still have no idea who committed the crime. And after all this time, it is almost impossible now to come to any kind of assessment as to who committed the crime. I think as parents, for them, this is something they view with overwhelming sadness, because they at all times sought to pursue the case from the point of view of trying to ascertain who killed Aarushi and Hemraj. And that is the reason why they went to the lengths they did to try and get these exhibits sent to forensic laboratories abroad. That is the time they protested. They filed a protest petition against the so-called closure report which the CBI had filed. They went to all of these, they went to these extreme lengths because it was their daughter who had been killed. And they could not separate that aspect of the case from the CBI's attempt to involve them in the matter. So really, while we celebrate the acquittal of Rajesh and Nupur Talwar, I think I will not be wrong in saying that as far as they are concerned, they will return home perhaps tomorrow with an overwhelming sadness that they were unable to catch the killer of their only child and of Hemraj.